still enjoying playing for the Bengals? And what did you make of kind of what happened in your comments on Wednesday?
My comments had nothing to do with Cincinnati. My comments had everything to do with me and my mindset in football.
Do you feel like there's too much weight on you where it feels like if you're not perfect, the team is good enough around you to pick you up?
I want everything on my plate. I want that's the position I want to be in. And, I feel confident in all those guys in the locker room. Like I said, today, there's not a team in the NFL that would have won the game today if I was the quarterback.
All right, Stephen, now you hear those comments from Joe Burrow. You buying it? You buying what he said?
No, I'm not. I appreciate him manning up. He's thrown 4 interceptions over the last 2 weeks, 2 pick sixes. He hasn't been himself. Yesterday was 4 of 10 for 59 yards and picked off twice when under pressure. That's not the Joe Burrow that we know. I'm in no way saying that I don't know him. I've met him once or twice, interviewed him on First Take. Got a lot of respect for his greatness as a football player, as a quarterback in the National Football League. He deserves all of our respect. We saw him guide the Cincinnati Bengals to back-to-back AFC Championship games and the Super Bowl appearance. And he came close to winning that game, by the way, against the Los Angeles Rams. We know who Joe Burrow is and what he can do. And I'm certainly not making light of the potential reality that there are other things going on in his life that have an effect on him. But he is a professional. And to look at his face and to hear his words, and then to know what the residue of being a Cincinnati Bengal can impose upon you. I'm not gonna attach legitimacy to his comments. I think he's just being classy, and he's not pointing the finger at the organization. But I've asked this question, albeit rhetorically, and I did this last week, Peter, and Cam, you know this too. I asked the question, and I'm dead serious about it. Who wants to be a Cincinnati Bengal? I mean, if you had your druthers and you got to pick, who out there would pick to be a Cincinnati Bengal? Sure, you get drafted. Sure, it's free agency out there, and they might pay you. That might be where you could get paid compared to somebody else, even though Mike Brown's one of the cheapest people, one of the cheapest owners in the NFL. But who's salivating about being a Cincinnati Bengal? Even with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins there and Joe Burrow, that's why. It's not because of the organization. I will remind everybody that Carson Palmer once quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals and was willing to retire rather than play for them. And the same kind of things you heard out of owner Mike Brown's mouth at that time about Carson Palmer, you hear out of his mouth about Joe Burrow now. They sort of shove it aside. But playing for the organization can be a bit debilitating because they cut corners and they don't do anything right. Peter Schrager, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it that I think the only team, maybe there might be one more, but I think it's the only team in the NFL that doesn't really have a GM. They don't have an official general manager. Am I right, Peter?
Duke Tobin's pretty much the one make the GM decisions. But yes, it is Mike Brown's team, and he is.
That's right. That's right. I know they have somebody that makes the GM decisions, but I'm saying nobody has that official title as a GM. This is Mike Brown. And I think that you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they're not to be respected. And I've often said that Zach Taylor doesn't need to be the coach there because you've had ample opportunity over the years to be a respectable enough team that doesn't fall apart at the seams if Joe Burrow isn't on his A game. Most of the time we have seen him on his A game. This season that has not been the case. First due to injuries and then him coming back and throwing those interceptions against Buffalo, and then obviously doing it again yesterday. It's sad, but we all know what's going on. It's tough being a Cincinnati Bengal. They should actually pay you more for doing so, and they go out of their way to pay you less.
So I'll say it this way, and I'll give America some insight from a player inside the locker room. To think that Burrow's comments did not in some way, shape, form kind of point towards insinuating his relationship with Cincinnati, absolutely. And it's not to say that, hey, I'm ready to pack up and leave, but it is something to be said about the frustration of any competitor like a Joe Burrow. Everywhere that Joe Burrow has been, he's won. He's contended. Let's just put it that way. Well, when you get into the National Football League and you start to have revelations and realizations to say, hey, I'm not playing meaningful games. The games that we're playing are meaningless in December. Hey, why aren't we getting prepared for the playoffs more so getting prepared for, vacation? These type of things can wear on a individual who is as talented as a Joe Burrow. And for people to know, it's not the destination more so than the personnel. Yeah, you may say to yourself, hey, who wants to go play in Cincinnati? Nobody really wants to go to, to become a Cincinnati Bengal. But the realization is, well, you have one of the most talented quarterbacks in all of sports in that landing spot in Cincy, and that's Joe Burrow. So people want to play with Joe more so than anything else. I say to Joe Burrow as a person who I'm very fond over and a person who I'm a fan of, he's frustrated. And I think anybody who has been hit as much as Joe Burrow will kind of look back and say, like, yo, I literally have to do everything. I literally have to play perfect. And guess what? Even when I do play perfect, that doesn't even mean that we're going to win. So that's the most frustrating kind of revelation that he has said. And guess what? He cannot say those type of things publicly because it's not a good look, but it's the truth.
I feel bad for Joe Burrow. I do. He objectively had his worst game as a pro yesterday, and he said it as much in the post-game press conference. That's not me picking on Joe Burrow. He knows that's not what he expected to do. And after a week where there was such a funk around him and such a national discourse, you would have liked to have seen him light it up and put up 42 points and beat the Ravens and sweep them and stay alive in the playoff hunt. Instead, it's the exact opposite. There was a pick six, and if Joe Flacco had been warming up and was warm, he probably would have finished the game. It was that bad. I will say this. It is so hazardous and it is so debilitating to that organization for us to be talking about Carson Palmer because they thought they emerged out of that funk. That was the reputation, and that was the stink around the Bengals. Terrible facilities, cheap owner. You're practicing on what looks like to be a parking lot outside the stadium. While, in Dallas, you've got the Star and the whole thing. And they get Joe Burrow, they get T. Higgins, they get Jamar Chase, they get to the Super Bowl. Mike Brown's daughter, Mike Brown's granddaughter, Elizabeth, who is like a marketing whiz, they were changing things where the Bengals were playing primetime. And they would have this deal called like the ruler of the jungle, and they would honor old Bengals. And it became a place. It became a thing for a while. Joe Burrow's at Fashion Week. Jamar Chase is at NFL Honors, coolest dressed guy in the room. And now we're back to Carson Palmer dialogue? That's 20 years ago. But that's what Joe Burrow's comments did. And whether or not he wanted to throw the organization under the bus, whether he wanted to bring that up again, the stench is suddenly back. 3 years missing the playoffs. And you have to think, gosh, how did we get here? When I remember being in LA for a week and we were crowning the Bengals as the new look Bengals and this organization that has emerged from the wreckage, and the Jets and the Browns and the Raiders, you can do it too because the Bengals of all places did it. I am so sad for that organization, and I cannot believe we're mentioning Carson Palmer's dissatisfaction. All of it's warranted based on the way they're playing and the way their quarterback's talking.
You should be sad for them. And I looked it up, and in terms of personnel, Peter, you know this. Do you know they have the smallest staff in the NFL? That's just being cheap. Now, let's understand the importance of that, y'all. If you remember, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, years ago, this is years ago, when the television the whole Colin Kaepernick situation going on, all that stuff, years ago, courtesy of the television contract, each owner was handed a check for $246.5 million, if I remember correctly, Peter. All of them. Yep. $246.5 million. That was years ago. The NFL's print money. And this man, you understand, you got to be really, really stupid to lose money in the NFL if you're an owner. You got to be a new level of dumb to lose money in the NFL. It's one high-ranking executive in the NFL that told me that. A new level of stupid to lose money in the NFL if you are an owner, okay? And here this man is making this money and cutting corners at every turn. What are you doing with the smallest staff, personnel-wise, in the National Football League when Joe Burrow is your quarterback? When you got talents like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, even though he was out with a concussion yesterday. When you got talent like that, what the hell are you doing? You know what you're doing? You're being a Cincinnati Bengal. That's the problem. And Joe Burrow, remember what he said. I wasn't talking about Cincinnati. For all we know, he was talking about the city, not the team. He didn't say I wasn't talking about the Bengals. He said I wasn't talking about Cincinnati.
A lot to think about there. Rebarbative times in Cincinnati for sure. But coming up next, you know who's having fun? The LA Rams. Are they officially the best team in the NFL? And has the Lions Super Bowl window closed? Plus, Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza took home the Heisman. But do we have a problem with how Vandy quarterback Diego Pavia handled the aftermath? We'll talk about it.